Okay, in the interest of time, we're going to make a start. Good morning. I'm Stuart Foster, CEO of RECOUP, and welcome to what I believe is the 8th in our series of plastic recycling resource webinars, and certainly the last one of 2020. This one is focused on plastics and collections, with a particular focus on household and curbside collections. Thank you in advance to our speakers today and to you for finding the time to join us. If you've got a question during the session, please use the Q&A function, which can be found in the menu at the bottom of the screen, at least if you're on PC or laptop. I'll use these questions for the panel discussion, which will be at the end of the session. We'll prepare and circulate a short document for any questions raised that we're not able to cover during the session, and the slides will also be shared with attendees. Please don't use the chat function or virtually raise your hand, as we won't monitor these during the session. Also, just to confirm that only our speakers and chair have access to the camera and microphone, and the webinar is being recorded. I hope that most of you are familiar with RECOUP and its aims across plastic resource efficiency and recycling and protecting the environment. We're a cross-sector membership-based charity set up in 1990, and there are 3 pillars under which our activities sit, including strategy, projects and education. Within those areas, there's a whole raft of core activities each year which are agreed with 150 members and board, and much more information can be found on our website, www.recoup.org. One of those core activities is tracking and supporting the development of plastic collections. The annual Household Plastic Collection Survey has been one of the pillars of RECOUP's work since the early 90s. And it's one of our core reports, and I'd like to thank our members who collectively support this report and all of our core activities. Today is the first glimpse for anyone outside of the team into the new collection report from RECOUP, which will be published to members imminently. I actually dipped into our collection report archives, and it does make for some interesting reading. In 1990, it was reported that household plastic bottle collection was 340 tonnes, rising to about 7,000 tonnes in 97. It also mentioned things like RECOUP anticipate more than 60% of household plastic packaging material could be recovered through curbside collections. It says cost-benefit analysis and life cycle assessments generally support the reprocessing of plastic bottles and containers. And it says things like recovered plastic may be recycled either directly through mechanical processing or depolymerized and used as feedstock for a variety of chemical reprocesses. Really interesting, given a lot of the conversations today. These are statements from the 1990s. But this was before the introduction of packaging producer responsibility and packaging recycling targets, which have since driven the development and rollout of household systems and has increased consumer, political and environmental demands for more plastics to be recycled, something that all of us are very aware of. Public collection points, popular in the early 2000s, have largely given way to curbside services, which generally outperform those earlier bring schemes in terms of tonnage recovery by at least 5 times or more, with consumer convenience being a key driver. That also opened up to more variable quality of collections and higher sorting requirements and potential misuse of the system, because the collection point was now on everyone's doorstep rather than the local retailer car park or library, which tended to attract only the dedicated recyclers. Bottle-only collection systems were expanded to include box and trays as well in many cases, something we officially started tracking from 2007, and more recently films have been added to some services as well. Of course, in 2021, the key consideration is going to be collections in the ongoing development of policy, including plan consistency measures and, of course, EPR. Collection is one of the fundamental requirements to recycling of plastics, and that's sometimes overlooked in the ever popular "can it be recycled, is it being recycled" debate. Data and insight around plastic collections is important, but reliable and good data is critical to making the right decisions. Let's not also forget the importance of behaviour change and consumer engagement, which we'll also hear more about this morning. Again, something RECOUP has delivered for the past 30 years. Yet somehow it still feels like much more could be done in this space. Those who've tuned into our conferences over the years and our webinars this year might get a little tired of hearing me say it. And despite COVID-19, the long-term ambitions around plastic resource efficiency and the need to further increase plastic recycling are as important as ever. On that note, I shall stop because we've got a lot to get through. We will go straight through the 4 presentations, and then at the end, as I said, we should have time for 15 minutes of question and answer and discussion. So I would like to hand over first and foremost to Steve Morgan, Infrastructure and Policy Manager at RECOUP, who's going to cover off the UK Household Plastic Collection Survey 2020. Over to you, Steve.
Steve, you're on mute.
I'll say that's an old photo of me there. This report is actually supported by Nordo and LARAC, and we actually go out to every single local authority in the UK to collect the some information, and we also look at local authority websites as well. So I'm just about to give a bit of a next slide, please, Bex. Just about to give an overview of the report that will be circulated to members next week. You've got the front cover on the left-hand side there, and as well as things like collection quantities and service provision, we're also looking at export markets, waste crime, recycling end markets, communications and behaviour change, and obviously the legislative changes that are going to be happening over the next few years as well. Next slide, please, Bex. Okay, so looking at the collection quantities, on the left-hand side, you see a graph there of the collection quantities since curbside collections were tracked in 2003. And you can see those progressive changes. The data for the new survey, there's actually 560,000 tonnes estimated that have been collected across the UK for household plastic packaging. So you can see the figures there, 377,000 tonnes of plastic bottles, 160,000 tonnes of pots, tubs and trays, and 22,000 of plastic film. And this is actually gives us a very kind of a small but progressive change from the previous year. The changes are actually outlined in the report in quite a lot of detail. But I think this is looking at 2019 data. I think looking at next year's data around the 2020 figures will be very interesting to see. Next slide, please, Bex. So looking at the collection rates, this is when you compare what's actually placed onto the market, what's used, against what's collected for recycling. On the left-hand side, you'll see plastic bottles. The collection rate remains at 59% as it was last year. So we've actually seen an increase in the placed in the market figures in a report called Pack Flow, which is done by Velpac and supported by InkPen and WRAP. So there's an increase in place in the market figures. There has been more bottles collected, but they two balance each other out. So the collection rate is still the same. And we've seen minor collection rate increases for pots, tubs and trays and for plastic films as well. But the overall rate is still below 40%. Next slide, please, Bex. In terms of service provision, the last local authority that was collecting, due to collect plastic bottles from Kerbside, started collecting last year. So now 100% of local authorities collect plastic bottles as part of their Kerbside collection schemes. 85% now collect plastic pots, tubs and trays, which is up 4% on the previous year. But that's partly down to the reduction in local authorities within England. There's been a gradual decrease of local authorities collecting plastic film for obvious reasons. That's jumped from 16% down to 14% in the last year, but there's an increase in those collecting plastic plant pots. On the right-hand side, you'll see in the reports when you get it next week about how this is tracked over the last 10 years. Next slide, please. So looking at plastic film, if we go back 10 years, there was 10% of local authorities collecting plastic film as part of the Kerbside collections. This jumped to 20% in 2015 and then back down to 14% this year. So why is this the case? There's a document actually I found, it was actually published in 2002 by RECOUP, outlining how to collect plastic film, how to handle it, how to reprocess it, and where the end markets were. But things really haven't moved on too much in that time. But what we're starting to see is RECOUP now, there's an increase in retailers using store collections for film. I mean, a lot of film, are carry bags you can take back and recycle it, retailers, over the years, but actually now they're expanding those schemes to collect more items of plastic film. And this is something we're going to be watching very carefully. RECOUP are actually also working with REP on this to provide guidance to retailers of how they can increase, put in place schemes and collect that material within their stores. Next slide, please. So recycling end markets. Plastic packaging has, in many cases, been exported for recycling over a number of years, and that's still the case with about 60% still exported. But we looked at some of the end markets that are available at the moment, and we've actually had mixed opinions from local authorities. Some have said we've actually got no issues with our end markets at the moment. Some have said we've got very, very hefty restrictions and we're struggling to find end markets. But if we actually look at the actual end destinations, the chart on the right, this compares the end destinations for January to September in 2019 and January to September this year. And there's been some shifts. We're relying more so on Turkey than we used to. There's been a drop in the numbers going to Malaysia and Hong Kong, and other countries have remained remarkably the same. But it is a volatile marketplace. So I understand the challenges that are obviously ongoing on finding end markets for material. Next slide, please, Bex. So just touching on this, looking at waste crime, there was a waste compliance task force that was launched in October. This is actually to do with setting up a forum to bring people together, policymakers together, regulators together to find more effective ways to prevent and tackle waste crime. Obviously, we do not want to be seeing some of this ugly export that's actually ends up in uncontrolled waste sites in other countries. A lot of the material we actually export is very, very good quality material. That's great, but we obviously want to make sure that we don't open ourselves up over the coming years to criminal activity and illegal export of material as well. Next slide, please, Bex. In the report, you'll actually see a very good case study on recycling on the go. This was a scheme set up 12 years ago in collaboration with RECOUP, the local authority, and also with Nestle Waters in Buxton. So Buxton at the time didn't actually collect any material, so any plastic bottles from household collections. And they put a lot of recycling on the go schemes in place, both in schools and on the high street in public places. And this scheme's actually undergone a refurb. So you see in the middle there, the older bins that have obviously been heavily used. These have gone into a very, very good refurb now. And we've had some excellent results as a result of that refurb. So just about 80% of the material collected in these schemes are plastic bottles or aluminium cans, and there's very, very small amounts of contamination. So this is one you might be interested in. Next slide, please, Bex. Other things in the survey this year, we've covered not just the collection of plastic packaging, but also how it's sorted and recovered as well, and reprocessed. So there's some data around that. There's also information on fly tipping, littering, and also collection wheelbin colours as well, which I always find fascinating to read. Next slide, please, Bex. So looking at the future, you might be wondering what I've got a picture of Usain Bolt and a young sapling on the same slide. Well, this is to do with this about obviously the pandemic. It's obviously affected every single part of our lives. And as we look to the future, there's been loud calls for a green recovery. But what does this look like and how quickly can it actually happen? So the way waste and recycling is funded is through the UK Packaging Producer Responsibility System, or EPR. And the key principle as we move forward is to cover the full net cost of managing all aspects of waste management, while also funding communication campaigns and the cleanup of litter. And even in the spending review last week, the Chancellor said the cost of processing packaging waste will be switched to manufacturers and sellers. Every single one of those points on the left-hand side there actually really, really matter. So from stopping leakage into the natural environment of material to transforming end markets. The question is, how quickly can this happen? With EPR somewhat 3 years away, we need things to actually progress and happen at a lot faster rate. But if acceleration is not possible, through your own organisations or through LARAC, Nordo or RECOUP, we offer the opportunity for the next 2 or 3 years to try and design the next system and make the outcomes really meaningful in terms of positive environmental outcomes. So thank you for listening. The report will be available next week, and you'll see the press release announced in that time as well. Thanks very much.
Lovely, thanks, Steve. Just one point of clarification from the questions because it's relevant. The question is, does pots, tubs and trays collection rate still include other? And is there any way to separate this? Are you aware of what that means and what the answer might be? Yeah,
there's a good amount of material that's estimated when you place it onto the market. Instead of actually being a pot, tub and trays, it's actually estimated as other. And actually talking with others and within the industry, we found it better to attach that other fraction into the pot, tub and tray fraction as well. So that's something we've done for this year and last year, and we'll be looking into that in more detail for next year and how we further understand that fraction a little bit better.
Lovely, thanks, Steve. We shall move straight on now to Tim Durrett, who's the Director of Sustainable Technology at Veolia UK and Ireland. Tim.
Hello, hi everyone, good morning. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to present, try to illustrate what the waste management industry in the UK is doing and is willing to do and how to support the transformation on plastics today. So I'm gonna have 10 minutes to show you a bit, what are the challenges within the plastic recycling, but also the opportunities. We are going through a unique context in terms of new regulations to come. So we're still in the phase of consultation, but we're talking about the tax on plastic. We're talking about the deposit scheme, the EPR reform, harmonization of collection, and on top of that, I would like to add the Basel Convention, which is going to affect the export of plastics. We still export today around 60% of our household collected plastics. So it's a huge number. And all these changes will obviously provide an opportunity for our country to invest more into infrastructure and to recycle more. So I'm from Veolia, which is a leading group on resource management. So if you can go to the next slide, please, Rebecca. Just a couple of words. So we're looking after the waste management, but also the energy and water. And I think really plastic, obviously, it's a very waste topic, but more and more we are seeing, an interest about the energy side of the plastic in terms of carbon reduction, carbon savings it provides. Some manufacturers are shifting to alternatives to plastic. And I think we have to be also mindful and careful about the impact it can have on the energy side and the carbon footprint. And on the water side, it's obvious, but the pollution of plastics is one of the key drivers to try to improve our management of this material. On the next slide, please. So plastics, 2019, 2018, the Blue Planet effect, it was probably, public enemy number one, the plastic. In 2020, things have changed a bit, I think, in the mentality of the general public. There was a consciousness that plastic was also very helpful in terms of hygiene. So it is an essential material. There are alternatives, but it remains something very practical and versatile to package or product. We've seen as a waste management company, and I think it's pretty much the same for the whole industry. We've seen much more plastic collected from the household in 2020. So obviously the working from home impact. And I guess the good news here is our infrastructure coped very, very well with that. So I'm talking about the material recovery facilities. So Steve mentioned about 110 of them in the UK. So we've got a good network of facilities. So the quantity of material is I think here is fair to say that it is not the issue. And also in terms of the HWRCs who remain open most of the crisis, we still manage to capture the material collected from the household. Slightly different stories on the commercial side. Obviously, lower activity and lower tonnages there, but overall, it's been a very rewarding year in terms of that side. One of the outcomes also is that the contamination remains an issue. You know, I think we've all seen and heard about the PP, so the face mask issue that was put in the recyclable bin. Unfortunately, that is not recyclable today, so we're working on that. But yeah, I think it's still important to communicate to the general public as much as we can that to follow the rule and the guidance of each local authorities to make sure that we, as recyclers, we achieve the right quality in terms of recyclates. On the next slide, please. So one of the big challenge, but also which is becoming a big opportunity, essentially in terms of recycling rates. So only 7% of the plastic film and flexible used by the household is collected and recycled today. So it gives an idea of the opportunity we have to improve this. But the reason we only at 7% is there are key challenges. The end markets is not it's not in place yet, and that's due to mainly to the composition, the diversity, the contamination rate of this specific stream, and also the collection is not yet in place everywhere. But that's kind of a result of the end market and the sorting, the supply chain not being yet in place. So the end markets, what we hear, there is a demand because of the plastic tax. So manufacturers, brand owners, some of our members of RECOUP, they want to use more recycled content, but the supply is not there yet, and it's principally due to two facts. One is the quality that is produced today is not sufficient for the reason I've just mentioned. But also, I think it's fair to mention about the viability of this supply chain. So it is expensive, it is difficult to sort, to clean, to wash, to recycle plastic film because of the diversity of packaging, because of the low density of this material. So this comes back to a couple of things, but I think eco-design is one of them. I'll talk about that on the next slide. But the fact that there are so many different types of wrappers, lids, carrier bags, etc., makes it very, very difficult for and very, very expensive to set a new infrastructure in place. One thing we would like to stress is obviously there's some talk about should we include films into the Kerbside collection comes 2023 with the harmonization of collection. There's different working groups working on that topic, but I think one of the main early outcome is we should really not mix the film, the flexibles with fiber into commingled collection, because if it's mixed with fiber, then we have an issue of cross-contamination, and also it's very difficult and expensive to separate both. If the fiber is collected separately, then we also think there's a question mark about should film be collected at curbside because of the quality. Because of the quality we have as an industry, we have to reach in order to be recycled and reprocessed by the reprocessors. Having said that, we are being active on other materials. So on the next slide, please. A couple of examples of topics we're trying to tackle. Beside the films, we got the pots, tubes, and trays. So a large fraction of the pots, tubes, and trays is the PET trays, the clear PET trays, and the opaque. It's not a very developed recycling route at the moment. So we've secured a grant through UKRI recently with two other private companies We're going to make some trials with the hope to build a new facility in order to provide a stable outlet for this stream. And separately also on the black plastics, again with some other private companies, we managed to implement detection of detectable black plastics on all our sorting facilities for the UK. So it's proven to be very successful when the private sector is working together with the support of the public sector like a UKR and I. We are able to develop trials, to develop changes. And one of the solutions, part of the solution is usually, again, this eco-design. If we can simplify, if we can rationalize the design of the plastics packaging, it really helps down the line to close the loop. And I would even say that, if you're a brand owner or a packaging manufacturer, working on the design of your packaging not only help, for you to manage the end of life of the material, but also will help you to source material, raw material with recycled contents, because that's, the principle of the circular economy is, it comes back to you at some point, one way or another. And this eco-design aspect is really key. So in a nutshell, to conclude, I think, yes, we've got some challenges and they are not new, especially on the film. And I think the opportunity we have is always these new regulations to come. That's an opportunity for the industry to make sure, while the regulation is being implemented within the agenda, which I think is really important that the government keeps the initial agenda in terms of dates. We are confident that the industry can adapt, and we are willing as a private company to invest more, subject to having fair deals in terms of durations, price, and quality requirements to invest more in the UK, to recycle more and export less. Thank you. That's it for me.
Thank you, Tim. Just to say, RECOUP have lots of good eco-design tools and certifications if you need to look into that. But also, particularly, we're really supportive and welcome the Veolia developments around the PET, something that's been close to our heart for many years. And we're looking for those solution providers to come through now, because it's a big opportunity moving forward. Tim, there was one just point of clarification within the questions. Someone asked about the 7%. And whether that relates to front of store and curbside, or how it's calculated.
Well, Steve, do you want to? It's from the report, right? The draft report I've seen. I think we are between 5 and 7% on household film being collected and recycled.
So, Tim, from your facilities, is that a mix of curbside and front of store, or is that more one than the other?
No, from Veolia's point of view, we try at MRF level to extract the film, but the end market is very difficult. So I would say what we do is really not insignificant, but it's very marginal. We're trying to do more, but again, we need to find outlets, credible outlets.
Lovely, thanks, Tim, and we'll come back to that if we've got time at the end. Moving straight on, next up we have John Coates, Head of Waste at Lincolnshire County Council. John.
Thank you, Stuart. Firstly, thanks to RECOUP for giving LARAC the opportunity to support the excellent work of your annual survey. Next slide, please. A quick overview of who we are. LARAC are a local authority subscription organisation with 294 member councils out of the 383 waste and recycling authorities in the UK. So we represent a broad spectrum of members, both waste collection and the waste disposal authorities. Next slide, please. So I'm going to give an overview of how local authorities address the challenge of collecting more plastics for recycling. And I'm going to concentrate on the following topic areas: design, how to engage with our residents and give them a solution that can achieve the highest collected yields of the right quality; treatment infrastructure, how we organise the supporting components of the supply chain; markets, how our reliance on external elements can be challenging; and legislation, how the policy proposals in the resources and waste strategy might be the game changer we've been waiting for. Next slide, please. So designing the system. When designing a collection system for households, it has to be clear for residents. The clearer and simpler the system, then the less cost we will bear in explaining it, engaging with them and achieving its aims. If we operate a mixed service of curbside collection, bring sites and use of recycling centres, then that makes this harder. The term plastics covers a wide range of household items made from different polymers that require separation to be genuinely recycled, and that is challenging for councils to articulate to residents. We may be comfortable with terminology such as hard, rigid and flexible, but do residents understand? So to improve our chances, we tend to describe what we want in our system as the things they are: bottles, pots, tubs, trays. And then we find ourselves down blind alleys defending why we require caps or tops left on bottles, whereas our neighbour authority accepts them loose, or why we don't accept yoghurt pots. A lot of time this is linked with the treatment contract we buy. So when we have our scheme designed, now we must inform residents how to use it. I suppose the key measure of this is how many pages the scheme leaflet requires to get that message over. Maybe that could be a new KPI for councils. So the scheme is up and running. We've sent everyone a scheme leaflet. Next comes the challenge of getting the results we want, and that takes boots on the ground and knocking on doors. How vigilant and strict will the collection crews be about contamination? Black rubbish bags or nappies are easy to explain, but rejecting for hard plastics but accepting rigid plastics is not so. This can be the biggest area of cost and time if we want our plastics collection to make a significant contribution to our recycling rate. Next slide, please. Thank you. Whereas waste disposal authorities will invest in EFWs and MRFs, I'm not aware of one yet that has its own plastics facility. We are dependent upon private operators to give us the infrastructure we need, and as plastics is such a specialised field, they are not abundant in the UK. One of the key cost elements in waste and recycling is moving it, and this creates inequity for councils in being able to access UK infrastructure at a local level. Maybe this explains the significant reliance upon MRFs and the prevalence for commingled collection systems and the MRFs' reliance on foreign infrastructure. This is not the best way, and it's not circular. The way we access plastic recycling infrastructure does not help. Our procurements require a demonstrable track record from any bidder, as we are the guardians of the public purse and we don't take risks. But if they are not winning any contracts, how can they make any money? The scarcity of UK infrastructure means that capacity for our collected material may not be available when we want it, and we have to accept a lesser technical solution. We have to move the collected material on, the supply chain has to work, or else it will bottleneck and start leading to a reputational crisis for us. So our specification cannot be Rolls-Royce because there just aren't enough Rolls-Royces to go around. So we do not aim high and push the sector forward, but accept what can be bought at the time. The nature of public sector contracts can lock out innovation and opportunities to upgrade the treatment infrastructure to take advantages of new developments. We are cautious when procuring so as to avoid challenge later on, and many recent procurements have been done against the challenge of our fiscal situation and increasing international restrictions that further constrain what we ask for and end up buying. With the value of plastics being so intrinsically linked with the price of oil and councils' desire to secure a firm price over the medium to long term, I don't think this delivers the best solution for plastics recycling in the UK, and may explain why the volumes collected and percentages of placed on market material recovered show such a slow pace in their upward trajectory year on year. Next slide, please. So if you're a private operator and you've built your plastics sorting and recycling facility and managed to secure a long-term local authority contracts to fill it, that's the job done then. Sit back and relax? I would suggest not. Your supply chain will be dependent on offshore partners or markets due to the chronic shortage of infrastructure in the UK. A lot of the packaging comes into the UK from offshore, so even if your secondary raw material is excellent quality, it has to get over to the fillers and bottlers to return back as packaged goods. The PRN system is universally acknowledged as flawed, if not broken, and the ease of obtaining ePRNs for exported recycling is not helping us to do better inside the UK. This is ever more true when your most direct competition is the black gold, oil, which fluctuates more than a politician asked a direct question by Piers Morgan on GMTV. Your local authority customers will not want to hear about any of this, as they will niggle you with requests to reduce your price in the name of best value and to help address their year-on-year funding challenges. So succeeding in this space will be testament. Oops, sorry, just gone too far. Slight Take up here, folks. My screen's gone all wonky. I do apologise. So succeeding in this space will be testament to your business skills and resilience. And if those fail, and those that fail will take capacity out of the market, so the high aspirations for councils, residents, government and businesses to do more and do it better become harder to reach. Our infrastructure development needs must be funded, and we are reliant upon private funders in the main, and when they consider the plastics recycling sector, they will take account of its track history and business closures. Every analysis of the sector screams out about the lack of capacity and the need to invest. That is why efforts such as the recent £20 million research investment fund from the government are so necessary. We do not want plastic recycling facilities to become the gasification plants of tomorrow, abandoned and forgotten to rust in our acid rain. Next slide, please. Let's turn to the latest throw of the dice, the government's resources and waste strategy. Published in late 2018, I can honestly say it caught the local government sector off guard. Where had DEFRA been hiding all these insightful and brave strategies for the last 15 years? Had they been living in cupboards under the stairs of Whitehall and now saw their moment to rise like Harry Potter's to free us all? It came out bold, challenging and optimistic, and reignited a dormant flame within the industry. At last we had a set of cross-sector policy proposals that engaged everyone and got us thinking about a bright new future. The English national government was finally stepping into a space it had abandoned for so long. We are fortunate to be in the middle of it now. Oh, and a little thing called COVID-19, but let's not go there. We will have a model for consistent collections that will include plastics, so even if a local authority finds them just too challenging to deal with, they can't ignore them anymore. There is a vibrant debate about exactly what plastic should be in the mix, with film and flexibles under consideration, and that's welcome to see. At last, as citizens, we should experience a universal future, so wherever we live, work and holiday, we should be able to recycle the same materials and not have to ask, what do I do with this? And we have explicit policies to drive the changes we have been wanting for so long. EPR will target packaging and is augmented by the plastics tax for plastic material, and that is where we hope the funding for the step change will come from for both collections and treatment infrastructure. DRS goes after drinks containers to both increase the volumes captured and reduce that which becomes litter. It won't put any money into the pot of councils, it just moves the cost burden off the public books and onto private companies and their customers. And the effect will be to remove the packaging that has the highest values in a lot of local authority contracts and thereby helps to reduce our costs. But we are suspicious of the perverse incentives or unintended consequences these might produce. Manufacturers and retailers can move much quicker than local government and our contracts. We take years to bring changes to collections into being and to secure treatment contracts, and they usually reflect the world at the time we go to the market to get them. We base our decisions on the data and experience we have now. If EPR and DRS cause manufacturers and or retailers too much pain, they will change to other packaging materials that incur lower fees or are exempt. This could put further strain on the financial stability of our supply chain and the viability of its components. Assumptions made today may not stand up in the future. Perhaps the debate we should really be having is that we need a grown-up conversation about the infrastructure we need to meet our waste and recycling ambitions. We need a mixed economy of treatment technologies that need to be geographically spread to ensure equity for the councils that need them, so that the full range of materials gathered through the consistent collections can be processed to achieve the aims of the circular economy. These could be offered to the market on a regional or sub-regional basis, and investors would see a long-term commitment and revenue stream, and the partnering local authorities and private operators could begin to genuinely work together without the shadow of expiring contracts or volatile market conditions, consuming everyday thoughts and strategic planning. Final slide, please. That's the end of my presentation, and thank you once again, RECOUP, for this opportunity, and I'll see you for the question and answer session later. Thank you, Stuart.
Lovely, thanks, John. And just in case anyone's not tuned into it, those legislative discussions and policy changes are going to take up a fair bit of time into 2021, but actually they're probably going to shape the systems that we have to work within and the infrastructure opportunities for the next decade or more. So certainly RECOUP, and I know most other speakers and many stakeholders are going to be heavily involved in that. Okay, next we move on to Anne Hitch, Citizen and Stakeholder Engagement Manager at RECOUP. Anne, over to you. Anne, you're on mute.
Dear, there's always one, isn't it? There's always one that does this in every webinar. So as a Citizen and Stakeholder Engagement Manager at RECOUP, I'm responsible for and lead on the pledge to recycle plastics communications with citizens. Many of you will remember this as being the old Pledge for Plastics, which was rebranded a couple of years ago. Our campaigns carry the strapline, plastics recycling, cutting the confusion. So the whole idea now of Pledge is to reduce and to eliminate all those questions that consumers have with regard to the complexities of plastics packaging. We did a study in 2019. This is actually hosted on the RECOUP website. You can see from the picture to my right, the lady there with her head in the hands saying, why do they make it so complicated? So this study videoed people in the household actually what they were recycling and how they were doing it. And we've used a lot of this intelligence to formulate a lot of the assets and a lot of the conversations that we're having under the Pledge brand. It's fascinating reading, and there's a video there for you to look at, so please head that way. Next slide, please. So looking at the survey and the detail of what local authorities tell us of what they say to citizens, as it's been referenced with our two previous speakers, there's a lot of complexities when it comes to plastics packaging. How do you actually tell people to put the lids on, lids off, whether you give a message, empty and rinse, flatten and squash bottles, remove the film lids, what do you do with the absorbent layer? All of this has to be relayed to consumers in order to get a plastics packaging recycled that is of a higher quality. And a lot of these complexities actually turn people off from recycling because they just don't understand what to do with the bits and bobs. How clean is clean? What do I have to do to make it acceptable to the local authority? We also, within this, we would encourage local authorities to give as much about the what not to do as what the to do's. And I think that many of you are out there this morning that will have seen some of the horrors that go through mixed dry recycling and that affect the quality of the recyclers. I don't have to mention them, nappies, sanitary ware, the list goes on. Next slide, please. So under the Pledge to Recycle Plastics website, we have a free resource. There's a pack and there are resources which take you through, give a whole range of banners, posters, and graphics that actually give the do's and don'ts of recycling, as well as some transformation messages. Every one of these resources are fully editable so that you can transform them. You can use the Recycle Now social norming messages alongside or not. It is up to you how you edit them, and it's up to you how you add your brands and identification. Any problems, you can contact the team direct. Next slide, please. We've also started using Pledge to Recycle site to gather some data. We feel it's important that we understand what people understand about plastics recycling and their perspectives. What do they know about tops on or off? What do they actually do with their pots, tubs and trays? We've got a quiz which is hosted on the site. We would encourage all local authorities to get in touch and we can connect and drive traffic. We are going to be able to analyse this data nationally and regionally and demographically so that we could give you information on your area of what citizens think. What we would ultimately also like to do is to be able to track this alongside any plastics recycling communications. So we can understand if you're delivering a communication to your citizens, over time, does that change their perspective? If you want further information, just please get in touch. Next slide, please. During COVID and 19 restrictions and lockdown, it's been even more important that we engage with people through social media. And we see our social media platforms as becoming increasingly important. Please connect with us on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook. We connected both via RECOUP and Pledge to Recycle. What this allows us to do is it allows us to give the perspective of the whole value chain and deliver that to consumers. So it's backed up by what the value chain is actually doing. We've had a number of key successful campaigns. The Stop It, Don't Drop It campaign, I don't know whether any of you saw it, but it was hugely successful. And as well, tackling this awful situation we've got of COVID litter. Masks and gloves, I think. We had the slogan, gloves and masks don't belong on the grass. So please connect. Next slide, please. So we have a campaign coming up at Christmas. We would like you all to share and use the hashtag P2P Christmas. And I think what we're trying to do here is just to focus on some key messages. The bath bubbles bottle can be recycled. Again, tackling the mass situation and reduce, reuse, recycle. Next slide, please, Bex. As I said, we see social media as a key way to move forward in terms of communicating with citizens. We have scheduled 5 main campaigns next year, and we would be really, really keen to get involved with any local authorities or brand owners that want to support. We will be doing a lot on recycling it right, transformation messages, linking with things like Recycle to Read launch, World Book Day, linking with Clean Up Britain on litter campaigns, focusing on film recycling, front of store schemes, and then we'll come round full circle with back to school and lost value and resources. Last slide, please, Bex. And finally, don't forget, although we can give you some mutual support as non-members through our core programme, if you are interested in becoming members, please get in touch. We have also launched a new newsletter called Pledge to Local, which is focused entirely on pledge information and directed at what we feel that local authorities might want to know. Please contact Amanda Bakewell if you are not already on the mailing list, and if you had any suggestions of what you would like to see us cover, also please get in touch. I would, before I finish, just like to reference a question that was posed earlier. One of the things we do not know is we don't have any true data in terms of if we were to do a communications campaign to consumer, what that brings you as a local authority and what that brings us in terms of improvement in tonnage, but reduction in contamination. So this is an area that we will be looking at in the future. Thank you very much.
Lovely, thank you, Anne. And I think, as I mentioned in the introduction, you know, the behaviour change, consumer engagement aspect is going to be critical moving forward, just as much as the infrastructure and the actual collection systems. Right, we shall try and get through the questions best we can with the help of the panelists. Just to build on the communications discussion, there was a specific question then that for you, John, which was in terms of spending on recycling communications. As Anne said, there's more information needed in that space, but do you have any insight into that? Could we collect that information? What's needed?
That would have to be voluntary, because none of the authorities report it as part of their annual accounts. It usually gets hidden within the waste management function. So I know there is some benchmarking done through some organisations where that might be one of the benchmark figures, but it's not reported regularly as a matter of any of the requirements. So it might be something that LARIC and RECOUP could work together on to understand. I mean, there are some excellent quality campaigns out there. I won't mention any names, but authorities who are performing at all levels of the recycling performance table. There are some excellent communications out there, but I don't know what they cost those authorities, but there's definitely some hard work and graft being put into it. So again, maybe something we can work on together.
Okay, so in terms of independent and one-off case studies, there is some numbers, but in terms of bringing it together, that's work to be done and something maybe RECOUP and others can take on. Okay, thank you. John, just while I have you, there was a question also around what can be done to accelerate the inclusion of film collection in Kerbside, and there's some concerns it might even take until 2028 for some authorities to get on board with that.
I think the key one there is I think there's a clear message from industry and the local government sector about the appropriate way to collect film and flexibles as well, particularly with regard to the sorting facilities we've got access to at the moment. It does need development funding to invest in new technology to enable film to be extracted better, or either it's a separated collection. And I think Tim made the point earlier on that at the moment, with 80% of collections being commingled, the preference is not to put the film in a commingled collection because it's in with the paper, and that causes all sorts of problems. So maybe we need to be having the discussion about which one is out. Is it paper and out, and is that out with card as a fibre stream, and plastics is in with plastics, metals, and glass. It'll be interesting to see what the consistent collections do say as the optimum model that we should all be aspiring to.
Okay, so Tim, there's also a question on, well, it's more of a statement. So there are sorting plants in Germany where polythene, polypropylene, mixed polyolefins are separated by an AR. Is this done anywhere in the UK? And also, if it's going to be done, is it more likely to be dedicated facilities to sort film or bolted onto existing sorting?
So there are indeed some facilities in Europe who manage to extract the film, but they do have a very different context in terms of, some countries got a ban for energy recovery with plastics. So their value chain is completely different. And this allowed them, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, to invest into this infrastructure. So our context in the UK is about to change, but we're not there yet. So unfortunately, at this stage, we've got very little capacity in our country.
And I'm not sure, Tim, if you or any other panelists are aware of any regulatory issues in terms of the films that have been in contact with meat or dairy products.
So that's causing issue in terms of cross-contamination, especially with the fiber I mentioned. I've seen a question about, what fiber means. Well, fiber means newspapers, cardboard, office papers, anything which will absorb the residual food in the plastic. But yeah, that's about it. Really, it's about cross-contamination.
Okay. And Steve, there's been a couple of questions just to clarify some of the points you made. So, in terms of explaining why the curbside collections remain stagnant in the last year or so, and also just a question around MPWD data. So that's where the official plastic recycling data is held, and it seems to be suggesting that actually more is being recycled domestically. Is that just a blip, or is it an actual trend?
The first point around curbside collections, I mean, you've actually seen an increase. There's an overall 2% increase in collection levels. So we receive a lot of data from local authorities and also waste management companies as well. So we're pretty happy that we're in that kind of ballpark area in terms of the increases. MPWD, we have some access to that data, but we do get a far more granular level from the data provided by local authorities and also from their opinions as well. So it's not just a case of just taking the data, which sometimes can be a little bit misleading in terms of the actual detail of what the splits are between, for example, bottles and pot stubs and trays. We actually do get a lot of opinion as well. So we're able to sort of input that opinion in how we split the figures up. That helps.
Lovely, thank you, Steve. And then there are some questions moving on to the PET trade. So actually, I'd like to ask Anne first, in terms of engaging the consumers, do they understand the industry language around we want a PET tray and we want it in certain formats, or do we have to start looking at how we engage the consumer more effectively? You're on mute, Anne.
Do I expect a consumer to know a clear PET tray from an alternative, for example, PP or whatever? It's just almost impossible. What you've got to relate it to is the product, and I keep coming around to the fact that can we start making it more real to them? But what we do know is that people have issues with clear trays, for example, where it might have been meat and other products like that inside. They don't want to cross-contaminate their kitchen. So that's another challenge, where they might be quite happy to do things like where it's vegetable trays. So it's not only the tray itself, but it's what product was in it before. It is very complex. So I think to actually get them to do something different with what is a PET tray as opposed to other clear trays or opaque trays.
Okay.
It requires a lot more conversation.
Okay. So from John and Tim then, we've got questions as to why PET pots and trays are classed as hard to recycle when PET bottles aren't, and actually, you know, how can companies better establish contacts with British companies who are interested in separating PET trays for recycling maybe elsewhere in Europe?
Yeah, I can start, but the processing facilities which recycle PET today, clear PET, are designed to recycle bottles, and the bottles and the trays are different. They look the same, they are the same, made of the same polymer, but the PET trays will have some laminates, they will have some additives, they will contain, you know, usually meat, so with grease, and this for a bottle recycler or a PET recycler will really affect their performance and the quality of what they produce. So that's why they tend, it's a non-targeted item for them. And they will, you know, ideally they would like companies like ours to separate the trays at the front end and send the trays somewhere else.
Yeah, it's exactly what Tim said. In our a lot of local authority contracts with MRFs, when the plastic prices are high, we get a lot of subsidy from the bottle recycling. That means that they will accept pots, tubs and trays in their contracts. Now, there's been a shift from those organisations, those operators taking on medium to long-term contracts at fixed price, and ever more contracts are now fixed to the markets. And the poor value of pots, tubs and trays is what makes them difficult for us to articulate with residents, particularly if councils react to falls in prices and therefore possibly MRFs. So it's a challenge, and I do put it down to say there is a lack of UK infrastructure for the legislation and the policy drivers, that it does start to shift that. So we've got more choice and better technology here in the UK. Thanks.
And someone has also asked then, so are the PET trays recycled with the bottles?
As I said, it's not a targeted item, so it will be allowed to a certain level, but it's not desired. So it's not a stable and credible recycling outlet. Definitely not.
Okay, so we're almost out of time, but we have had more film questions come up. So Steve, just in terms of clarifying the previous question, there was a drop in curbside collection of films from 20% to 14%. Could you expand on that?
Oh, so that's the number of local authorities collecting plastic film as part of their curbside collection schemes. So that went from, I think it was about 10% of local authorities collecting in 2010. It went up to 20% in 2015, and now we're down to 14% again. but that's driven by the complexities of handling that material within the MRFs, as John and Tim have referred to, and also the current lack of end markets for that material. But there's a lot of hard work going on behind the scenes around developing markets for this type of material, particularly with polyethylene. And I've personally seen a lot of projects taking place that are developing some quite good outcomes. So I think we'll be having a completely different conversation in 2024-25. By 2028, 100% of local authorities, in theory, should be collecting plastic film with the necessary infrastructure behind it to recover and recycle it as well. At least that's the ambition anyway.
Okay, so the open final question is around the role of chemical recycling to recycle more film in the future and developing end market applications. And linked to that, on another webinar recently, it was suggested that actually more likely for film collections to go ahead if DRS also goes ahead, i.e. it creates more space in Kerbside. That one's open to anyone who feels brave enough to answer it.
Yeah, I can take that one. So in terms of freeing up capacity in the sorting facility, as I've mentioned, capacity is not the issue. So if the bottles, more of the bottles are going through the deposit scheme on the go or all in, that's not going to solve the issue on the film in terms of sorting and because it's more about the price and the technical aspects, not about the capacity. So it's point number one. And chemical recycling, yes, it will be part of the solution, but I think there's enough reports now, stating that mechanical recycling is more virtuous in terms of carbon footprint. It's more a credible solution for now. But I'm confident, chemical recycling will complement, will add on to that in the coming years.
Lovely, thank you.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that, it comes down, it's all about quality and really contamination, and a lot of the stuff that's in the contamination can be the film and it can be the paper and card. Let's look at what the consistent collections are, but maybe those two problem materials, out of a commingled collection might actually start to help us achieve where we want to be in the future.
Perfect. We have unfortunately come towards the end of the webinar, and I know that each of these topics we could spend another hour each on them. But just from the panelists, are there any final sentences you'd like to share? Any final points you want to get across? So John first.
I'd encourage every local authority to engage either individually or collectively in responding to the consultations when they come out, get involved in the debate and help shape the future.
Thank you. And Steve?
I'd just like to echo what John just said. We do have I know it's a cliche, but we do have an opportunity now to really shape things into the next 10, 15, 20 years even. And DEFRA and others and regulators are actually engaging with industry. So it's a wonderful opportunity for us to try and influence the future in the right way.
Thanks. And Anne?
Yes, I think it's been clear that throughout COVID, when people have been at home, they've had more time to recycle. There's less being consumed on the go. And I think now if we're moving to a greener future, as the government would have us believe, we need to make the most of that opportunity. And now is the time to connect with people and to monopolise on that situation, to drive plastics recycling forward. And I think it is the start of the green economy, and the jobs in the economy are going to be crucial. And we have an opportunity here.
Thank you. And Tim?
Yeah, I think the objective set up by the government is very clear. And I'd say that the technology can be a challenge, but it's definitely not a blocker. We have the technical solutions to recycle more of these hard to recycle items. The blocker, I would say, is what are the blockers for more investments, for more infrastructures in the UK? And it's key to really address all our opinions to the consultation. Then we can make sure that the pace is maintained. And let's watch out what's going to be the next step, because we'll need more and more of this regulation framework to support the change.
Lovely, thank you. So collections are going to be a critical piece of the jigsaw, but it looks like from the data, the discussion today, and actually the reports that will come out in due course, there's a lot of opportunities there as well. And I'm sensing there's enough confidence there that we can get it right. And particularly as mentioned through the policy, through the collaboration, it feels like we could be on the right track, but there's a lot of work ahead. If you've got any other feedback or anything else, please do send them through to us. There were some technical questions on the Q&A I couldn't get round to. As I said, we'll answer those independently afterwards. So that just leaves me to say thank you once again to the speakers today. That was fantastic. Have a good day, and thank you to everybody. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.